Let's talk about this league, the Big Ten, absolutely crazy. And it changes every week. And been talking about it each week with our guy, Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports. Is all over Big Ten and college basketball. And it's just so fitting, Isaac, that this crazy league ends up with Wisconsin picked 10th in the preseason. They get a share of the Big Ten, and all they got to do is beat Nebraska. But look out for those Cornhuskers who don't let them get hot. But Wisconsin gets a share of the league. I had them low in my prediction. I think I had them 8th, 9th, somewhere in there. And why wouldn't you after all the talent they lost? I thought they'd be competitive, make an NCAA tournament, but I did not see this coming. But it is very fitting that this Wisconsin team, 5th in the Ken Pom luck stat, 2 bank in shots in the final 30 seconds to sweep Purdue and not give Purdue a chance to get a share of the Big Ten title. Thoughts on Wisconsin Badgers, your Big Ten champs, at least co-champs?
I mean, that was an incredible scene last night. It was an incredible game. It went back and forth. I thought that the basketball that was being played, and especially in the second half, was really, really good. I was concerned a little bit because it felt like the stars weren't showing up. You didn't get much from Zach Edey. You didn't get much from Jaden Ivey. You didn't get much from Johnny Davis in that first half. And even for stretches of that second half, they were pretty invisible. But, you know, the thing that was on full display for me is that Wisconsin's role players really are underrated. I think that you're getting more out of Chucky Hepburn than you would have ever thought. Take away that bank three at the end, but everything else he did during that game, I think he finished with 2 assists and 0 turnovers, which was huge. And then you look at what else the other guys are doing. Like Tyler Wall was arguably the best player on the floor for Wisconsin at times last night. And his ability to go at Zach Edey and do whatever he wanted on the block is just ridiculous. And Stephen Crowell doesn't hurt you. Jacoby Neath helps you. Chris Vogt comes off the bench and helps you. Ben Carlson helps you. It's just like all the other guys stepped up in such a Wisconsin way. And it's a little bit like the Cardinals, you know what I mean? Like they just find these different pieces that come in and just do the job, and they might not look all that intimidating, but they get the job done. And Wisconsin, we have to give them credit. They're the Big Ten champions right now, co-champions. And man, is this luck ever going to end? I don't know.
They deserve it. I mean, they deserve this title, all the close games they won. There is a little bit of fortune that goes into making 2 bank shots, that goes into winning 15 straight games by 2 possessions or less. There's also some skill. There's also, you know, the ability not to beat yourself. And we've been saying that for 2 decades now. Wisconsin doesn't beat itself like Purdue does. Illinois at times does. And that's maybe why they won't win 16 games. That necessitates probably a Big Ten championship here. But another guy that I know people don't want to give any credit to, like some of these plays can be dirty or bend the rules a little bit. Brad Davidson is invaluable to this team. Not only is he scoring 14 points a game, he just makes so many winning plays. Even if that's drawing a 3rd foul on Edey that I didn't necessarily like, it's devilishly smart. I don't like that refs get, called into calling those calls, but Brad Davison knows how to do those things. And if Trent Frazier was doing that as an Illinois player, or DeMonte Williams was doing that as an Illinois player, you'd love it. He's a guy you hate playing against, but you love when he's on your team. He's the AJ Pierzynski, whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to ask you, Isaac, we've talked about this back and forth. Wisconsin is the St. Louis Cardinals of college basketball and Big Ten basketball. And I give them, like, that to me is not like some put down, like they're just lucky. That is an organization. Like, these guys play well together. They know their roles. And it seems like the organization gets the most out of them. And it all comes together into consistent winning. So what's it like to root for one of those teams?
It's really nice not to have to worry about if my team's going to be competitive every year. You know what I mean? Like, you just know the Cardinals are always going to be competitive. I sometimes take it for granted because, you never feel like you always have like this World Series juggernaut. You're maybe not going out and spending like some of the big dogs in baseball, but it's nice to be competitive. And there's something to be said for being constantly competitive. And I think that's what we're seeing with Wisconsin. And the one thing that I think that's underrated about them is, one, they always have point guard play, which is really huge. And I think Hepburn's turning into that next guy. And their player development, like you said, is so, it's just different. It's a jarring difference from some other programs. Like, look at the difference between Stephen Crowell from last year to this year. Like, he's made huge strides. Johnny Davis has made huge strides. Tyler Wall has turned into a completely different player with a ton of confidence, who maybe he doesn't have the most analytically, beloved game because he shoots a lot of threes and stuff, but it doesn't matter. If he gets into the lane, he's going to take and find his spots and do what he wants to do. And they're so sound defensively. So it's a masterclass on player development from guys that, are talented, but they turn them into way better than what they are.
And they all just play so damn hard. Like they just play so hard. Like Tyler Wall, man, and Brad Davidson, like those guys play so hard. Johnny Davis, like the rebounds he gets, it's a bunch of effort, and that's culture. That's coaches demanding it out of them. So they play so dang hard. And if you're not a fan of another Big Ten team, I think you'd like watching them because they get the most out of themselves. I do think, my personal opinion, Isaac, that Greg Gard solidified Coach of the Year last night. That I don't even know if he needed to win last night to get that, but I think he solidified that. Johnny Davis, I mean, every national analyst was saying he's got it. I didn't even think he had that great of a game. I thought Jaden Ivey played better, towards, especially when it mattered the most in crunch time. But he's had a heck of a year, and then he's stepped up in some big ways when they've needed to. So he's had those big time games against big time opponents. I think that's what separates him in a lot of people's minds compared to Kofi, who struggled against better opponents, and Keegan Murray, who I think those guys are the top three. Keegan Murray's number is not quite as impressive as you'd expect against top 25 opponents. Johnny Davis only gets better, it seems like, against those top opponents.
I think the stat was he's averaging 25 points and 8 rebounds a game against top 25 teams. That'll do the job, right? Like that'll do the job. And it's easy to overlook those clunkers against Penn State or some of the inefficient nights that he had when he does that. And when he goes absolutely off and plays like the best player on the floor. And now yesterday, though, I didn't think he was the best player on the floor. Like I thought that he really struggled at times. I think that he did a nice job, though, of not necessarily forcing the issue. I think he only finished with 12 field goal attempts, which is low for him, one of his lowest outings of the year. And if you look back through his usage rate against Purdue, the first game, was the highest his career. Like, I think he had like a 42% usage rate, which is absolutely stupid. And this game, like, he realized that, hey, they're all over me. They're sending help my way. And he trusted his teammates. And I think that was really, really important. And at the same time, like, you look at Jaden Ivey and you feel like he has these glimpses of where he's so good. But then there's also glimpses where you're like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't know what he was doing on the floor. And it's just like, you just want that consistency from him. And, give Johnny Davis credit. Like, he's always consistent. Maybe his shots aren't falling, but he's going to play defense and he's going to rebound and he's going to make the right pass most of the time. And so even though, like, we can, it's easy to say, oh, he's not consistent because he shot 4 for 16 from the field. That might be right. Shots don't go in some nights. It's the Big Ten. This league is so good defensively. But he does everything else with consistent effort, and that just can't be overstated. Like that type of culture that he has, and he's the leader of that. He's the ringleader of that, and Brad Davidson is too. That can't, that doesn't just happen. That's taught. That's a development thing. That's we all are doing this together, and he really embodies that.
On the flip side of this, Purdue has to be so disappointed that in a year that the Big Ten is not that strong, at least I think at the top. Right. Like Illinois is a good team. Are they a great team? We'll see. Maybe in the NCAA tournament. Wisconsin, I think we can all agree, doesn't pass the eye test of a great team. Like you watch Arizona last night, or you watch Illinois play Wisconsin. You're like, not a great team there, Wisconsin. But Ohio State inconsistent, right? Michigan State and Michigan are having off years. They got to be so disappointed they don't win a share of the Big Ten title. And they couldn't get a stop. Isaac, like Jaden Ivey's going off down the stretch. When Zach Edey was on the court, they were great. Trevion Williams was awful. I thought Matt Painter going to Trevion Williams at that under 8 media timeout really hurt Purdue. I didn't think Painter had a great finish to that game, but it's defense, right? They couldn't get a stop. And for whatever reason, this Purdue team just looks like it coasts at times. They just, I don't know if that's unfair, but it feels like we've seen their elite level. Like Illinois saw their elite level at Mackey. And usually at Mackey, they have that. But for whatever reason, they just don't seem like the motor revs. I mean, you saw the complete, opposite yesterday with Wisconsin. It felt like they won that game with 50-50 balls and obviously some nice bounces that go their way, but they created a lot of opportunities and it just felt like Purdue did.
Yeah. You feel bad for Purdue. And I think, Zach Edey had a quote in the post-game press conference where he's saying, when are the bounces going to go our way? When's this going to happen? Because you look through, like, they've had 4 Big Ten losses where they've had, 3 buzzer beaters in the last 1 second to go ahead and lose a game. And then they had a Rob Finney 3 with 18 seconds left that broke that one. And you go, when are the bounces going to go our way? But the other thing that I look at is maybe don't blow a big lead against Rutgers so that you're in position to lose on a half-court shot. Maybe take care of business against Indiana, and so you're not in position to get there. Maybe don't blow a huge lead to, all of those things. It's just like, it feels like this team, coming into the year, Painter is and I love Painter. Matt Painter is one of my favorite coaches in the league. I think he does a great job. But he talks about how deep this team is. I'm not sure they're as deep as some people think. Like, I like their role players, but Jaden Ivey needs to be on the floor for 38 minutes tonight. And I think that this 50-50 split with Travion Williams and Zach Edey isn't necessarily right. Like, you have to understand that, like, there are going to be some nights against Wisconsin, who is one of the worst post-up defenses, where you need to have Zach Edey on the floor. Like, he needs to be on the floor. That split might need to be 60-40. Isaiah Thompson got completely phased out of the rotation last night because he can't guard. Caleb First was not giving them a ton offensively, right? Like, and Ethan Morton is not known as a scorer off the bench. So, and Brandon Newman obviously got hurt, and that might be an interesting loss, although he was kind of getting phased out too. So I think this Purdue team, like, coming in, they're like, wow, we got 10 guys we can go to and all these pieces that are so good. I don't think they're as deep as some may think. And that depth hurt them, because you saw, the role players step up for Wisconsin when their stars weren't getting it going. And they made plays, and Purdue's role players did.
All right, Isaac. So for Illinois, this means they still need help, and they need help from Nebraska ball, which let's watch out for Hoiberg ball, because they are just on a tear here. 2 wins in a row. Huge upset of Ohio State, which is looking like a 2-player team right now. After that, Kyle Young big performance against Illinois, they have not played very well. It's all Liddell and Branham, and their guard play outside of Branham is just not very good right now. And EJ Liddell just doesn't have much help. He's having a heck of a year, but Nebraska has some talent. McGowan's boys have made some big shots. Alonzo Verge had his most point guardish game I've ever seen. He was making good decisions, which is like once in a blue moon. So Wisconsin, maybe it's a hangover, but it's Wisconsin. I don't imagine them wanting Illinois to have a chance at this. And of course, Illinois has to take care of business. Penn State at home. We know Penn State can be tough and muck it up a little bit. And then Iowa's playing as well as anybody. So we'll break down some of the scenarios. But right now, T-Rank gives Illinois a 6.5% chance at a share of the title. And you brought this up earlier in the week. It'd be crazy. It's a crazy amount of circumstances that Illinois over 3 years has the best record in the Big Ten by far. Over the last 2 years, could go 31-9 if they went out in the Big Ten and not have a share of a Big Ten regular season title.
And the 2 teams that won it, you absolutely curb stomped. You curb stomped Michigan last year in your one time you played them. You played Wisconsin this year, and it wasn't even close. Like, it's obvious Illinois has the severe matchup advantage inside. Kofi Coburn had one of the best games that we've seen from a big man all year long against Wisconsin. One of the most efficient games against we've ever seen. You curb stomp both of the teams that won, and you don't get it. You talk about Ayo Dosunmu, goes 25-5 last year. First time that any player's done that, had multiple triple doubles. He doesn't win Player of the Year. Kofi Coburn averages 20-10 this year. We haven't seen that from a big man in decades, and he doesn't win Player of the Year. Maybe I can understand the frustrations that some people could have. You go, man, we have like these things here. It's just like we have these special players. We have a special team. You love the rebuild, and we still just keep coming up short for these big things. Now, how do you fix it? You go on a run in March. Didn't get it 2 years ago. Didn't get it last year. And I think that, maybe those frustrations aren't as levied, aren't as, people aren't as mad about it if you go on a run in March. But it's just absolutely insane that we could have 2 back-to-back years of, stellar performances that we've never seen from anybody in the Big Ten ever in a long, long time. And they both don't win Player of the Year, and you both don't win the title, even though you beat the team that did it. Like, that's just, you can't make that up.
Yeah, we all know the circumstances of last year, right? Like, we all understand that. I saw some Michigan media last night saying, hey, if all these games Michigan's made up, they've won, well, maybe should have made up 3 more games last year and seen how it all played out. I think Illinois deserved a share. They signed up for the rules. Don't want to relitigate that entire thing, but we know what happened there. Also, I think 2020 not having a chance at the postseason, not having the Big Ten tournament, not getting to play Iowa again. We all wanted that, right? Like, let's get Iowa again in that great series, and not having a potential Sweet 16 run, because I think with the way Io, Kofi, and Andres Feliz was playing at the end of that year, I think that team could have made a Sweet 16. Maybe it helps you the next year. You don't have that dud. You know what the NCAA tournament's all about. But those things happened, right? And Illinois doesn't have, like, that's why that Big Ten tournament felt so huge for Illinois fans, because they finally got a banner to kind of put into place what this last 3-5 years has been of this rebuild, where you're bottom of the Big Ten, right? And all of a sudden you shoot up here and you want something tangible to hold on to. And you have that Big Ten tournament title. You just end up following it with one of your most memorable early exits in the NCAA tournament. That's why this season and the Big Ten title regular season means so much. And I think it means so much to get to the second weekend, is because you just want something tangible to hold. You want a banner, you want multiple banners for what is one of the best runs in Illinois history, right? Like to go 3 years like this, Isaac, where Brad Underwood's record is just ridiculous these last 3 years, right? I'll do the math in my head right away. 42-16 in the Big Ten. You're 42-16 and you don't have a Big Ten regular season championship. You haven't made to the second weekend of the tournament. Of course, you haven't played 2 of those tournaments in 3 years yet. So I understand why there's a lot of anxiety right now of Illini fans of, we got to get something here, because I don't think there's a cliff coming. And that's the important thing. Get as many bites at the apple. That's what makes Michigan State so great. And why they have so many banners, because they get so many bites at the apple. They're good all the time. They find a way to win. Wisconsin, the same way. But I understand the anxiety going into this postseason in this last week of the regular season, because you just want that tangible thing to hold and to show people, see how good we are.
And no coach of the year for Brad Underwood, either of the 3 years. That's like, that's just like, you could argue like he could potentially have been coach of the year every single one of those years. Now
need to be lower for him. Like, get Illinois pick 7th next year. They get second place or first place, then he'll get it.
Yeah. So it's just, you're totally right. It's just a completely different aura when you have something to hold on to, when you have the t-shirt that says champion on it, when you have you can put it on social media. Hey, we're the champs. You know what I mean? All those things, when you can raise cut the nets down, like when you can do all those things. And I agree though. It's like you want something, because this is the beginning. You think of something really good, but I just look at the future, and I know that this team's going to be here next year. Like, I know that this team is going to be in the hunt for a Big Ten title, barring something catastrophic. Like, what the future holds for this program, and it's sustainable. This isn't a 1-year thing. And I think that's something, if you're an Illinois fan and you're frustrated that you're not getting a banner, you might not get a banner this year unless Nebraska pulls off some, big upset. And you didn't get, you didn't get it one last year, even though you felt like maybe you deserved one. You can just keep the solace of, listen, we're not going anywhere. We're going to keep coming back. Like, I look at this roster next year and I'm excited about it. I love the upside of some of these things. I kind of want a little bit, not saying like I don't appreciate what the veterans have done for this program, but you kind of want a little bit of a new juice, a new blood. You want to see something you haven't seen before. I think, I was talking with a buddy about this, like, with guys, like with guy friends, the longer you hang out with them, the more you don't like them, right? Like, that's 100% a real thing with men friends and stuff. And like, that's kind of how you feel sometimes with your roster when you've seen the same guys and the same faces for a year after year after year. You kind of want something new. And I think next year you can see something new with 7 top 100 guards in that backcourt. Maybe they're young, maybe they're unproven, but I'm really excited about seeing what they could become. And that's why I wouldn't necessarily stress too much about this final little thing here, because you just know that this is going to be a program that's going to be here next year. You're going to be in the top 25. You're going to be a Big Ten contender. And that's the part that's sustainable. And that's the part that's the most exciting, because this isn't a blip on the radar, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think with the way they've recruited the pieces that fit, like Epps, Rogers, are really good talents. You've seen the flashes out of Melendez, that he could be a star. They go in the transfer portal. Let's be honest. We don't know what's going to happen with Kofi. Like, Kofi could be back. That's a potential. I'm not saying it's going to happen, or that I've heard it's definitely going to happen, but it's got to be a consideration, because there is some logic behind it. So I look back at Lou Henson in the 80s belonged to the Illini. Everyone talks about that. He won a share of one Big Ten title. And that's what this Big Ten reminds me of. Like, listen, I don't want to take anything away from the Bill Self, Bruce Weber run of Big Ten titles, 4 and 5 years. It was an unbelievable run, and Illinois deserved all of those. But besides Michigan State, there wasn't really another great program in the Big Ten at that time. So Illinois is in a much tougher Big Ten, and in these last couple of years of not getting a Big Ten title. I know what happened last year, but Michigan was very good, and I know why everything that went into them winning it, but it just shows how good the Big Ten is as well. That I think it's so deep that it's hard to go 15-1 or only lose 3 or 4 games in a 20 game schedule because it's so good. And then you've obviously had the Andre Curbelo and Kofi Coburn thing. So for Illinois to be as good as it is, it's pretty amazing. You just look through the Lou Henson things, starting in 81, third, sixth, tied for second, tied for first, second, tied for fourth, tied for third. The year the Flying Illini, they got second, right? Tied for fourth, tied for third. Like that was the 10-year run there for Illinois basketball. Great run. Only one Big Ten championship banner to show for it. I just bring that up because I think the Big Ten right now is kind of comparable to what it was in the 80s.
Completely agree. I think, I remember reading about those 04-05 teams. And I want to say like Iowa was decent back then. Like I was 7. I don't really remember that thing. You know what I mean? Like, so it just shows like the balance in this league. Like if you look at the Pac-12 right now, like Arizona's obviously.
I should say Wisconsin was very good. Bo Ryan, Devin Harris.
True.
I think it was Wisconsin, Michigan State, Illinois were kind of the teams back then. Indiana, I know in 2002 was pretty good, but it just wasn't as deep as it is right now.
Well, yeah. And like my point is like with how deep the Big Ten is right now, like if you put Illinois in the ACC, probably winning that one. You put Illinois in the Pac-12, maybe you don't win it, but you're right in the mix right there with Arizona. I would think like you're kind of fighting for that one up there too. So it's just like, it just feels like this, right now the Big 12 and the Big 10 are just the two, and the SEC are just like, they're so top heavy and they're so deep. And that's why just having a chance here in the last week is the most important thing. And you're going to be battle tested and ready to go. And I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter yesterday about how, the Big Ten's going to get, they don't have any teams that can really make a run in March. And I feel like it's so matchup based, and we can't really say that until we see the brackets, because I know that if Illinois is going up against teams that can't guard post ups, you're going to be just fine. Like you are going to be just fine. And if Illinois is
Alfonso Plummer gets hot or Trent Frazier gets hot, I mean, Jacob Grandison gets, they are a team that is capable of going far. They're also a team. And I think this is true of a lot of the teams in the Big Ten. If they get the right matchup, get hot, it's a team that could get deep into the second weekend. But they're also all these teams I could see losing in the second round, right?
Well, and the thing too that's different about Illinois that I wanted to bring up is I think Illinois is getting deeper as the season has gone on. And I think you're seeing guys like teams like Wisconsin, they're not as deep as you are. You look at Purdue, we talked about that earlier, the depth is going away. Michigan State's a great example. Yeah, they got a lot of guys. That doesn't mean they're very deep. Michigan is another example. Like it's getting, Brandon Johns Jr. is completely phased out of the rotation. And whereas with Illinois, it's like, okay, we have our 5. You think you like your starting 5. Curbelo has continued to press and say, hey, I need more run here. I need to get more in. Coleman Hawkins is starting to make his path into this rotation. I think RJ Melendez and both Luke Goody, both of those guys, like you just know what you're going to get from them when they get on the floor. Maybe they'll be a little bit up and down, but they're pretty consistent for freshmen, which is kind of unlike it. And you have a guy in Omar Payne who's just Omar Payne, right? Like you have a backup big. That's the thing though. Like you have 8-9 guys that you feel like you can theoretically trust. If Matt Painter could tell the truth and no one knew about it, I don't know if he would say he has 9 guys that he can trust. I know Tom Izzo doesn't have 9 guys he can trust. I know Juwan Howard and Phil Martelli and that Michigan staff don't have 9 guys they can trust. And that's the difference between this Big Ten, or between Illinois and the rest of the Big Ten. They have guys that they can trust. And honestly, this team that's second deepest is Iowa. They're turning into a team that can have some depth. And that's why I look at that last game of the regular season. That's not going to be an easy game anymore. Iowa's playing a lot better. And you can't just assume that you're going to be able to walk in and play. And that's why I look at both of those teams, Illinois and Iowa, are turning into the deepest teams. And you need that in March. You need multiple answers. I don't know if you necessarily had that last year. I think Illinois has a little bit more keys to the puzzle that can kind of come in and win you a game if necessary.
So just to go over the scenarios, if Illinois wins out, it will share the Big Ten title and be the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. If Nebraska pulls off another huge upset against Wisconsin. So they would need those things to happen. If they win out and Wisconsin beats Nebraska, they'll be the number 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. If Wisconsin wins, if Illinois splits its final 2 games, it's definitely got a double bye in the Big Ten tournament, and it would be either the number 2 seed or the number 3 seed, depending on if Purdue beats Indiana. If Purdue beats Indiana, you're the 3 seed because they beat you twice. If Illinois loses out, you could go anywhere from the number 3 seed to the number 5 seed. They're a 3 seed if Ohio State loses one more game because Illinois has the tiebreaker with Iowa. They beat Wisconsin. Number 4 seed for Illinois if Ohio State wins out and Iowa loses to Michigan, which is going to be a fun game itself. And then they're the number 5 seed if Ohio State and Iowa both win their final 2 games, which of course means Iowa beats Illinois. So a lot at stake there. They just got to beat Penn State, man. Like, beat Penn State. You got that double bye. You're either 2 or a 3 seed. And then the Iowa game, Isaac, after that, if you take care of business against, Penn State, you got a chance then to really pad your resume, because if you beat Penn State, it's not going to really help you net ranking, all of that. But right now you're probably on that 4 line. If you beat Iowa, that's one of your best wins of the season because they are the highest ranked net game you've won this season. You add double that. And then all of a sudden you go into the Big Ten tournament with 3 quad 1 opportunities, potentially, including, which I would love to see again, Purdue in the semifinal. So if you just beat Penn State, after that, it seems like it's all gravy for this team.
I think that it would be ideal for Illinois to have Purdue on their side of the bracket if you're trying to boost your resume. Now, if you want to go win the Big Ten tournament, you kind of like to be with Wisconsin, right? That would mean you drop to the 4. That's a lot going on there for that to happen. But I think if you really want to boost that resume, I think you'd boost it a lot if you go into, you take care of business with Penn State, you take care of business against Iowa, you win that first round game, maybe it's Michigan State, whoever that is.
And then you get Rutgers, Michigan, one of those teams.
Right. And I think you would want to play Michigan State right now. One thing to note with Michigan State, they keep playing post-ups one-on-one. They don't double. That's a problem when you go up against Kofi Coburn. That's a real problem. And I'm just going to go out on a limb. I don't think Tyson Walker is going to turn into MJ and score 27 points again. Did you? I don't know. I know you probably didn't watch that game last night, but I went and rewatched it this morning. Tyson Walker, they're playing drop coverage against him. He wasn't even looking at the rim to shoot at all. I have no idea how he went off against Illinois after.
Yeah, so many fans are saying,
so weird.
So many fans are after Ohio State lost last night. How did they lose to Ohio State? Ohio State played one of his worst games against Nebraska, played one of its best games against Illinois. It happens. This is basketball. The transitive property does not work here, right? So you can't get yourself in knots that way, but that's what makes Wisconsin so amazing, is they're consistently winning close games,
even though they look really ugly doing it. My favorite thing with Wisconsin is looking back and being like, do you remember when they beat Nicholls State by 3? Yeah. Do you remember when they, barely beat Northwestern and they barely eked past Minnesota and they needed a late bucket from Wall to beat Penn State after scoring 49 points through 39 and a half minutes? That's, some of those things are just it's just whatever. You know what I mean? They're the Big Ten champs. Yeah,
you know so well about it.
Yeah, no, I totally know all about it. What did Trevor Valise say? It's Jeremy Hazelbaker going off, late in the regular season. It's 100%. That's what it is. But, I think the thing too is if you look at this Big Ten tournament, sometimes last year people wondered if, hey, did Illinois winning that tournament, did that hurt them? I don't know if it hurt them. Winning those things gives you momentum, all those things. Does it hurt you? No, it doesn't. But I think that this Big Ten tournament gives you a chance to get onto that 3 line for sure. If you're on that 3 line for sure, I think that changes things. Could you get it where you're with Providence as the number 2? If you want to think ahead.
Right. Could you be with Wisconsin in Milwaukee? That'd be a heck of a crowd, heck of an atmosphere if those teams got to the Sweet 16. But yeah, I'd much rather play one of those teams if I get to the Sweet 16 than say Gonzaga or Arizona or one of these top teams. Kentucky potentially is a really tough matchup for Illinois. So yeah, I think the difference between that 3 and 4 seed is huge, even though I think Illinois is a 4 seed, the 1 seed would be God dang it.
Right. No, I don't think Auburn, or if they got a 1, would love to play Illinois at all. I don't think so at all. So it is right. That's where I look at this thing and I go, can you get to the 3? And if you can get to the 3, it requires beating Iowa. It requires beating Penn State, Michigan State. I think if you beat Purdue in the Big Ten semis, I think you're guaranteed a 3. And I think you can start thinking about potentially a 2 if you won the Big Ten title. Like you would have the amount of net wins that you're talking about. I think that would be your 25-8 at that point. That looks a lot like a 2 seed, you know what I mean, with some of the wins that they would have. And we'd have to, we'd have to see how it all plays out. But the one other thing too,
at that point, Isaac, you'd have 9 quad 1 wins, depending on how all the rest of the teams. Could you add another one if Michigan goes on a run here or something like that? Like you'd have the potential to be that maybe the last 2 seed if you'd made a run like that.
Yeah. And I think it really would matter more to be on that 2-3 line, right? Like if you can get to that 3 for sure, that's a great thing. Cause I don't think the difference between a 2 and the 3 are going to be all that negligible. It's going to be pretty negligible in the long run. But I will say if Illinois wants to do these things and they want to go on a run, their defense has to improve. If you kind of look back at the non-garbage time stuff, you have 1.12 points allowed per possession in 4 of the last 5 games. Now, granted, you're playing good offensive teams, but that hadn't happened very often in the first 23 games, only 5 times. I was kind of looking back through it today. That's a little bit concerning for me. Like this team really relied on defense for the most part for that run last year. Like their defense was the reason why they went on that run. And then they figured it out offensively. And it feels like this one's a little bit the other way around. Like you kind of like where you're at offensively. And it's kind of like, can we get enough stops? Can we get enough going on here? So I think defensively, this is a big stretch for them because I think you can get right against Penn State and that's going to be fine. But Iowa can test you in a lot of ways offensively with some of the stuff that they run. Now, I think Illinois has, a big advantage in the post. I think Illinois has a big advantage in the guards, but their wings can be a problem for you. Now, is RJ Melendez going to be back? Could that help with, helping out on Keegan Murray, some of those things that we'll have to find out. But if Illinois really wants to string these together, the defense has to find a way to get a little bit more connected. There's just way too many times where teams are getting easy buckets because they're not as connected. And it's simple things that it feels like easy to fix, but they just have to find a way to execute that. And that'll be a thing I'm really watching in this last week.
Yeah, and weird to say, but Michael Tuitt brought this up. Like Andre Curbelo could be a huge X factor defensively. Huge. Coleman Hawkins, huge X factor defensively. So to see those guys come along, giving Brad Underwood more options, giving them more depth, Isaac, I think is huge. And that's what you're hoping for. I think if you're looking for anything in your final week, it's to build off of those two and all the pieces kind of finally, after all this time, you're 20-8, despite all of these, hurdles you faced with illness and injuries. But if you can get right the final week and into the Big Ten tournament leading into March Madness, maybe then you can reach the ceiling we've all seen for this team. And kudos to them for probably reaching the ceiling of what this team was capable, given of all those injuries and illnesses. But Curbelo, man, is a game changer. Coleman Hawkins is something you don't have. If those guys can give you something somewhat consistently as sophomores can, this team could be really dangerous.
I completely agree. And I think Coleman Hawkins' emergence, when you look at some of the lineups that they're able to play, like the Trent Frazier, Alfonso Plummer, Jacob Grandison at the 3, and then you move Coleman Hawkins to the 4 and Kofi at the 5, that lineup has been really, really consistently good. Like really good on both ends, really good defensively and really good offensively. And you think about it, it makes sense because you have your ball handling, you have your 2 shooters or 3 shooters and Trent and Plummer and Grandison that keep the floor space. You have Kofi doing what he wants to do inside. And then Coleman just gives you that, he just gives you a different energy that you don't necessarily see. Like the offensive rebounding has been huge. His ability to handle is really comfortable. Like I think he's more comfortable handling the basketball than Devontae Williams at times. Like we've seen some of those things and the passing and everything else that goes in there. And I think Devontae is going to be a valuable piece and you need him against some of these teams coming up down the stretch. But if Coleman can assert himself as that guy, as a guy you can play for 21 minutes a night, it just completely changes how teams defend Illinois and how they can defend other teams because they're just so long. Like Coleman Hawkins might be your 3rd best rim protector on this team behind Omar and Kofi, and maybe he's second.
He does so many things better than Omar, right? There's so many other things he does better than Omar I think Omar's a better rim protector, but everything else, Coleman's obviously better at this point. Before I let you go, Isaac, I just want to run down the bracketology here real quick. Wisconsin, I'm looking at Brad Evans, Bally Sports. Wisconsin, the 8th overall seed, final number 2 seed. Seems right. Purdue now drops to the number 3 seed. Remember, I mean, they've been 1 or 2, it feels like, for the entire season. That seems right for those teams. And I think Illinois is the first number 4 seed. Sounds about right. So Purdue has got a lot to play for. Wisconsin, Illinois, they all got a lot to play for to solidify themselves in that 2-3 seed range, right?
I completely agree. Who is that last 1 seed that they would be with?
So Wisconsin would be, I mean, they'd probably be with.
No, I'm sorry. Illinois, I'm saying like they're the first 4 seed. Who would that one?
Brad doesn't break it up into where they're going to be put, but I would imagine it's Baylor or Auburn, right? If they're going to go to the Midwest.
I think you would be fine with either. Now, I have a lot of respect for Scott Drew and everything that he's been doing this year, but it doesn't sound like LJ Cryer is going to be back, and he's been their leading scorer. They obviously lost their big man inside, Everyday John. That's a big loss too. And then Auburn's guard play has been a problem. So like those 2 teams are talented and everything, but they have some flaws, and obviously you don't want to look ahead too much, but I think Illinois would be licking its chops. Like Walker Kessler is scary. I totally get that. People can look at the blocks and say, oh my gosh, he's scary. Colin Castleton tore him up on the block just because he has the length to go over him. And I don't think Kofi would be scared about Walker Kessler going into that game. So that's the thing. Like you have to think about far and ahead. Like every time I look at a bracket, and this is what I'm going to do on Selection Sunday. If you're looking at Illinois' path, you go, do they have a guy that can guard Kofi one-on-one? That's it. Because Illinois basketball is so much more effective when that's not the answer. Arizona does, Duke does. I think Gonzaga would feel pretty good about it, but there's not a ton of teams that have it.
I mean, a guy like Koloko, I mean, you're talking about the 1 seeds, Kessler, they have guys that can slow down Kofi or make it difficult for him. The first couple of rounds, I don't think you're going to run into that very much, especially if Illinois is a 4-13. I have a lot of confidence. I mean, everything can go wrong and maybe you lose, but I would have a lot of confidence because of Kofi. What would concern me is big guards, a lot of big guards and a good 4, right? That is what has been their Achilles heel. Speaking of that, Ohio State, you got to go from Illinois at 13 to Ohio State at 25. So from a 4 seed to the top 7 seed. Iowa also, I mean, we were talking about them as a 10 seed a couple of weeks ago, now firmly at a 7 seed for Brad Evans. And Michigan State in a month, Isaac, has gone from tie for first to a tie for 6, potentially an 8 seed in the Big Ten tournament. They're an 8 seed in the bracketology here, but I wouldn't feel good. I'm like, everyone's going to have them as an 8-9 game, having them advance. I don't feel confident in Michigan State. And I think they go up against a 1 seed. I don't think they have much of a chance at all.
Which team would you rather play, Michigan State or Michigan in the NCAA tournament?
Michigan State. By far. I mean, Hunter Dickinson is an amazing player. Caleb Houston and Moussa Diabate are trouble. It's about their guard play. If Eli Brooks and Devontae Jones play well, Michigan can be a giant killer.
That's my thing. And that's where, it's going to be really interesting to see if Michigan gets in this field.
How many guys would you draft on Michigan before you got to a Michigan State player?
Hunter Dickinson is a draft. I mean, he's one. I love Moussa. Like, I love Moussa. He'd be
I take Devontae in Houston next.
Yeah. I would take Devontae Jones right now. Devontae Jones or Max Christie is tough.
Max Christie? What's he done?
I don't think he's gotten a lot of help. I don't know if it's necessarily his fault for some of those things. Like I look at some of the point guards.
Might be the first guy I take on Michigan State, and I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, I think I would probably end up taking Malik Hall over Devontae Jones, just barely, but it's probably 4 right there. Like that's the third guy, and then he'd be the 4th. So it's close. And that's the thing that's frustrating is like you saw this Michigan State team at the beginning, you go, wow, so many guys. And now we're going, wow, so many guys. Marcus Bingham played 9 minutes last night. He was the 9th used player last night. Either that's Marcus Bingham being uncoachable, or that's Izzo, maybe losing a little bit. I'm not sure.
What happened to Gabe Brown? What happened? What happened? I mean, Bingham and Brown were playing really well. It's a very un-Izzo team. It's kind of 2 years in a row we've seen that, so it's been interesting. Indiana firmly in it, not really. 11 seed right now, but got a huge game, right? Indiana against Rutgers this week, I believe. So, I mean, that's a monster game with Rutgers, one of the first 4 out. That is tonight, Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday. Indiana hosting Rutgers. I would imagine whoever wins that one is in. Whoever loses that is out. Indiana then still has Purdue left. I don't think that hurts them necessarily, with everything to gain potentially in that game on the road, while Rutgers has Penn State. So I think if Rutgers wins this game, wins against Penn State, they're in. If Indiana wins this one wins one of their final two, they're probably going to be in.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. It's weird because you see certain flashes from Indiana and you like them a little bit, but this February thing is real. This roster continues to just to frustrate me. Now I will say Rob Finney being back was a nice addition, and they nearly lost that game against Minnesota, but having him back is big and helps them a lot. But I don't know if I love the leadership on that team. I personally, I would rather have Rutgers in the tournament other than Indiana. I just think that Rutgers is kind of deserving of it a little bit more based on what they've done down the stretch here. And I think that they would, provide more of a punch depending on the matchup, right? I think they would. But this Indiana team, you have guys getting suspended for games. You have, the shot selection that you have the inconsistencies, you have snapping back at coaches.
Watch. They're a tough watch, man.
It's really concerning. And, you look at what Mike Woodson has done, and maybe from the outside you go, wow, what a great job he's done. 19 and what are they? Yeah. 18 and 10, 9 and 9 in the tough Big Ten. You can say all those things, but the product on the court is not that palatable.
Rutgers' problem is it's non-conference. I mean, losing to DePaul, Lafayette, and UMass, they're 8-3 against quad 3 and quad 4 teams, but they're 8-9 against quad 1 and quad 2 teams. Well, Indiana's 6-10. So Indiana took care of the bad teams on schedule. They haven't really beaten many people outside of the big Purdue win. So I agree. I'd rather see Rutgers, but if Indiana beats Rutgers, I think that's going to be the one that vaults them and keeps them in.
So again, we were talking about how this Big Ten, we don't think this team, you saw all that stuff. Oh, I don't know if this team can make a run this, the Big Ten's going to be a non-factor in the tournament. I kind of want to zag and go, maybe 5 teams make the Sweet 16. It feels like this is the chance where, I know that there's frustrations, but Michigan is still talented enough where they could make a Sweet 16 if they get in with the right draw. I think Iowa is playing at a level that, we haven't seen them defend like this in a long time. They're actually playing real defense. And I talked about it at the beginning of the year. I like some of the individual defensive pieces. They're playing a lot better defensively on that end. I think Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin all could make Sweet 16s theoretically with the right draw. Ohio State is still dangerous. So it's I hear all that noise, but part of me wants to just go 5 in the Sweet 16. That's just how it's going to be. And,
because you wanted to be the guy, you want to be the guy that said, everyone saying the Pac-12 was awful before last year's tournament. And then look what the Pac-12 did. Right. They got enough teams in, enough dangerous 6 seeds and 12 and 11 seeds that they made runs and got hot at the right time. So I agree. I mean, we can all sit there and say, yeah, I mean, based on what we've seen, there hasn't been a pretty team. There just hasn't been a very pretty team in the Big Ten, but they are battle tested and they are dangerous because let's be honest, the Big Ten, it might not have the depth of some of these other conferences in talent, but the high level of talent, man, I can see Keegan Murray being a superstar in this NCAA tournament. I mean, Kofi is capable. Alfonso Plummer is capable of doing something like that. So Jaden Ivey goes on a hot run and Zach Edey plays 25 minutes. I can definitely see Purdue getting to a Final Four if they just defend a little bit. But based on what we've seen over the long sample size, yeah, I'm not bullish on them, but it'd be crazy in a single elimination tournament to say, oh, the Big Ten's definitely not getting an Elite 8 team or something like that.
Yeah, no, it isn't. It isn't because we just need to see the matchups. And again, the National Player of the Year conversation is featuring a bunch of Big Ten players. So that's some of the nuanced stuff that we have to consider. Maybe let's maybe lose the historical thing and just look at this year to date, because the NCAA tournament's the most random thing we have in all of sports, all of it. We have never had more random thing than this. And when you have superstars win and deep teams win, I don't like watching Wisconsin sometimes. I don't like the Purdue things that we've seen. I don't like some of the stuff from Iowa that we've seen. They're still really talented teams. And every team has flaws this year. There's not a complete team. Gonzaga and Baylor are an anomaly last year. We don't have a complete team in college basketball this year. And I think that's where you can look at some of these Big Ten teams that have the star power and are playing better at the right times and go, that's an Elite 8 team potentially if they get the right draw.
The one thing that you hope for Illinois is what they have a little bit different than these other teams in the Big Ten. They're old. Wisconsin's a pretty young team. Purdue, pretty young team. I know Sasha and some of these other guys are upperclassmen. Ohio State's pretty young. Iowa's got some older guys, but they're pretty young. Like you hope for, Illinois, Rutgers seem like the oldest teams in this league, but you hope that pays off. And you hope last year really fuels them that, hey, we can't, like, every game matters. Every day matters here. There's no tomorrow.
Well, and I think last year can be a little bit of a sounding board for Illinois, for Purdue. They were knocked out early last year, upset. Iowa was a 2 seed and got punked, and Ohio State. Those 4 teams, like they're going to have a chip on their shoulder heading into this tournament after how it ended last year. And I think that stuff matters. Going through it a second year with a lot of the same core guys for most of the teams, that stuff matters. It's stupid to think that it wouldn't help them, right? And going through that and experiencing that. So I think that, you're going to have some teams come in here with, they're trying to prove a point that this isn't going to be a year-to-year thing where they're going to get upset early. And I think that really matters sometimes too. And I still think Illinois has the highest ceiling of any of these teams in the Big Ten to make a run, because if you want to win 6 games, you got to be able to do it on both ends. And we've seen that on both ends from both of these teams. And I just think that you have the pieces in place to be able to beat teams different ways. You can beat teams 5 out. You can beat teams with Kofi in. You can beat teams with Plummer threes. You can beat teams with Andre Curbelo pick and rolls. And, you look at like Iowa, feels like they have one way to beat you. And you look at Purdue and you go, you have a couple ways to beat you. And I think that's where the difference is with Illinois. Like there's going to be nights where Illinois in the Big Ten tournament can hold a team under 60 because of their defense. And that can win you a game. And that's what's so valuable in this time of the year. And I expect bounce backs from those 4 teams that got upset last year early. I think it'd be shocking to me if all 4 of those teams got upset again.
Okay. So outside of Wisconsin, Illinois, Purdue, which team would you pick to go farthest in the tournament?
That's really putting me on a rough spot.
Go with the hot team. You want to. Iowa? You can go Iowa there? Ohio State, man. I love, you were on the Branham train before anybody. He's hot, man. Like they can get to another level, but it's kind of like Purdue defensively. I can't count on them. And that's why Iowa started to play a little defense. It's been bad teams. That's where I'm a little hesitant. Like they're playing a lot of bad teams here recently, but it feels like they can learn something from that. Hey, if we defend a little bit, we can be really dangerous.
I'll pick Iowa. And the reason why too is that, like, yes, it has been against bad teams, but the eye test, they're passing the eye test with how connected they are. Yep. Like if you watch that Northwestern team, I know that Northwestern cannot score, but Iowa's passing, like they're connected defensively. They are rotating really, really well. They're always in the right spots. Like they're executing the game plan. They're not getting lost on shooters. They know what they're supposed to do. That type of stuff matters. I mean, since February 6th, so since February, Iowa is 7-1. That's a real thing. Like that's a real thing. And I get they've played Nebraska twice. They've played Maryland. They played Northwestern. They played Minnesota, but the defense is real. Like they gave Ohio State problems, like real legitimate problems with their defense. Connor McCaffrey's been a big part of that. Aaron Eulis has been a big part of that. Chris Murray's playing better defense. I like Tony Perkins. He's been playing better as well. They switched up their lineup. They brought Perkins in and they put Toussaint on the bench. And I think that helped both ways. Kind of let Jordan Bohannon handle the ball a little bit more. So it's just like you see like this, the pieces are there, and Keegan Murray is legit. Like he is 100% legit. And the things that he does on a nightly basis are really fun. And I get it's easy to go, oh, it's just Iowa's system. And, they don't play any defense and he just can, do his thing in transition, but he is one of the best transition, athletes in our game. And the shot making that he has is stupid. Like the step back jumpers, the fadeaways, the threes, the post up moves, like he has everything you could possibly want. And if they can just be just decent defensively, we've seen them go on a run. And that's exactly what it is. And we'll have to see it against better teams. We're going to see it, this week. Michigan's going to test them. Illinois is going to test them because they really haven't played elite big men. Like I like EJ Liddell, but EJ is a 4. They haven't really played an elite big man. And when that happened last time they played Michigan won 84-79 and Hunter Dickinson went for 14 and Musa had 28. So we'll have to see how it is against elite big men, and they'll get that test this week and in the Big Ten tournament.
I'd still love to see Michigan against like Kentucky, Duke, or Kansas in the second round. I think that'd be a prime time matchup for a 2-10 game. Isaac Trotter, great to catch up about Big Ten. Exciting as always. And then we got the Big Ten tournament next week. We could preview that as well. Thanks as always, buddy.
Sounds good. See you later.